GMAT Club. I'm your host, Selvi, and today we have a returning guest, Melody Jones, founder of Vantage Point MBA, back with us for another incredible conversation. Actually, last time Melody joined us on Instagram Live, where we talked about round one predictions. And today, we're going to dive into something even more fundamental, which is how do you actually pick the right business school? So, because applying to the wrong schools, of course, is one of the most costly mistakes an MBA applicant can make. So, Melody, thank you so much for doing this. It's so great to have you back.
Amazing. Thank you so much for the warm introduction. Thrilled to be here.
Of course. Now, let's start, I guess, with the most basic but hardest question, which is how does someone actually know if a business school is the right fit for them?
Oh, that is a good question. And I think I might start answering that by saying, maybe what is the wrong approach, right? And what I see most often is just starting with the rankings and reputation and brand perception.
Oh, okay.
And so not that there's anything wrong with incorporating that into your decision. You should. And I did. And our clients do. And you absolutely should. But fit goes way, way, way more deeper than that. And I really encourage applicants to think about it both in terms of their professional goals and their personal goals. And so starting with professional, when you think about, an MBA program that's going to be the right fit for you, you always start with yourself and say, okay, what do I want to get out of this degree? Why am I pursuing an MBA? And what do I want to get out of it on the other side? And in many cases, that's a career pivot or that's an acceleration of your current career track. You have some sort of dream job, right? Or role you want to land next. And so start off by saying, okay, what are the programs that are going to be best equipped to help me achieve that goal through their academic focus areas, their recruiting relationships and horsepower, geography in some cases will play into that as well, depending on the industry that you're targeting. So that's the professional side, but that's not the only factor you want to consider, right? Because you also very much have personal considerations. And by that, I mean, where do you want to live after business school? Maybe you want to already integrate yourself into a geography or a city or a community because you want to continue your career there. How do you like to learn, right? Different MBA programs have different kinds of approaches to the learning environment, right? HBS is famous for the case method. Some programs really lean into experiential learning opportunities. So think about how you learn best. Also, do you want to be in an urban environment or a more rural environment? Do you want to be part of a much larger class and network, right? Like Wharton, for example, or do you want to be in a small, tight-knit community similar to what Tuck might offer? And so you really want to be honest with yourself about where you'll thrive and what is, the network and the community that you want to be a part of long-term. And then use those sort of points to start narrowing down the schools that are going to align with them. Now, not every school is going to check every box, but at least using those to guide and also to make decisions around maybe where it's not going to be the best fit because it doesn't include something that you really want, or maybe it includes something you really don't want. And of course, the last piece of it is just understanding where you're going to be competitive. Now, fit isn't necessarily explicitly including where you'll be competitive, but even if a school is a great fit, maybe it's not going to be worth applying if you are so far removed from their class profile on all the different dimensions.
Of course. Now, there is a difference between, of course, a school being a great fit and a school being realistic for your profile. So how do you balance both at the same time?
Yeah, exactly. That's the art, right? That's sort of where you have to be honest with yourself about, where you kind of land in the competitive spectrum. And you don't want to waste your time in the application process, like you mentioned in the introduction. That said, I am a really strong believer in shooting your shot. I don't believe you should necessarily count yourself out just because your GMAT score might be 10 or 20 points below the average, right? Admissions is a holistic review process. And so if, Stanford, for example, is your dream school, beyond just the fact that it's Stanford and your ego really wants you to be able to say that you went to Stanford, but because it's truly a fit for you and for your goals and the career and the life that you picture in the long term, then even if maybe you don't quite meet all of the criteria, if you will, or like the averages that are represented in the class profile, you should still apply because you always miss the shots you don't take. So I always recommend shooting your shot, but if you are committed to going to business school and you want to get an MBA and you want to maximize your chances of not having to reapply in the next cycle, obviously you want to also apply to Stanford and maybe a handful of other programs that are going to help you mitigate some of the risk and still maximize your chances of having an offer at the end. So you want to be realistic, but again, know that, there are exceptions and outliers that are accepted every single year. You don't want to count on being the exception, but you also shouldn't necessarily count yourself out. And so these are the conversations that I always have with our clients and encourage them to be realistic, but also, what if it does work out, right? And that's like the best possible outcome. And so you want to make sure that you're creating that path to success because it is a possibility.
Now, let's say if someone has 50 schools on their radar, how do you filter that to like a more realistic shortlist?
Yeah, I mean, 50 schools is, that's not happening. Certainly not if you're employed. So narrowing it down, my recommendation is if you're applying to like the M7 or the very top programs, you want to apply to at least 4 schools to, again, maximize your chances of acceptance. On average, our clients do actually end up applying to 4 schools. I think on the high end, we see 6 schools. I usually don't recommend more than 6, especially in one round, because you just start, kind of loosening your criteria. Yeah, and just being less focused in terms of what you're really solving for. But of course, applying to only 1 or 2 schools does bring in additional risk that some people are comfortable with, right? Like the conversation that I always encourage people to have, I have with every single one of our clients from the onset is what's more important? Is it the where or is it the when? And of course, both matter, but are you solving for going to business school next year? Or are you solving for, I want to get into these particular, 2, 3 programs? And then that's a different strategy, right? And we just have to understand what that risk is and be honest about what could play out given the dynamics and given the competitiveness of your profile.
Gotcha. And what is exactly the first filter an applicant should use when they start researching schools before anything else?
It's hard to prioritize, to be honest, because it really does depend on the person. Right. I mean, the first filter is like, why are you getting an MBA? Right. What do you want to get out of this? That is the first filter. And then from there, right, all of those different elements of fit are going to have different priorities for different people.
Understood.
So that would really be the starting point.
When it comes to rankings, ROI, or acceptance odds, if someone can only prioritize one of these, which one should ultimately drive the final decision?
Okay, you said rankings, ROI,
or acceptance odds.
Or acceptance odds. If those 3, gosh, I would probably go back to ROI. And I know obviously that's not also an objective measure, right? Because ROI is going to look different for different individuals. But I just think, you're ignoring too many of the important stuff if you focus only on the rankings. Because even, I had this conversation with a client yesterday. He's applying to both Harvard and Stanford, right? Both very top programs, but and other programs as well, not only those 2. But they couldn't be more different from each other, right? In terms of geography, in terms of class size, in terms of teaching method, right? In terms of, let's call it like career outcomes and concentrations, right? They're very different. Now, they meet his criteria in different dimensions and in different ways, but they're so very different from each other. And my point is that even within the M7 or whatever your band is that you're considering, the schools are really different from each other. And so that's where your research comes in. That's where conversations with current students, of course, leaning on the knowledge and expertise of your consultant if you're working with one as well, to really help you understand what are the differences, what are the nuances, and what are the trade-offs between the different ones. Because I know we're not there yet. We're talking about school selection up front, but school selection also happens on the back end when you have multiple acceptances. And so you want to really understand what those trade-offs are and understand what's most important to you so that you can narrow down on a decision that's going to maximize your ROI.
What kind of applicant should definitely focus on rankings when shortlisting business school? Because you said you shouldn't, but is there a possibility that an applicant should at some point of time?
So, I don't mean to diminish the rankings or diminish their importance because they matter. I mean, like I said, I cared about them. I wanted to go to a top program. My clients all want to go to a top program, right? And rankings, yes. Prestige, of course, matters, like signaling, like I said, like your ego, right? All of those things, like they matter, they count. But also it matters because that is also a reflection of the caliber of the network, right? And of the like career trajectory and career velocity that all of your classmates are going to have. And you're going to be a part of that network, part of that community. The network is always what MBA graduates will talk about in terms of the long-term ROI of their MBA. And so all of those things matter. And so I think everyone should definitely consider the rankings. I am personally in the camp that, outside of a top MBA, unless you're looking to make a career pivot or have absolutely no business background whatsoever, and you want to pivot from like a technical role into more of a leadership or managerial or commercial role, that, an MBA, like outside of the top 25 or top 30, I question the ROI personally. And so rankings do matter, but within those, you should really seek out to understand which programs are going to help you achieve the goals that you've laid out. And also just understand that there are differences even within the bands of the rankings.
Of course. Now, everyone talks about the dream, the target, the safety school breakdown, but what is the actual formula for getting, that balance correct? So how many of each should you target?
Good question. So I understand why those, buckets exist. I personally hate them. For a couple of reasons, right? Because there is no such thing as a safe program, right? When you're targeting top programs, like that's what our firm's focus is, that those are the clients and applicants that I'm working with. There is no like safe program, right? No program is a shoe-in, or you're not a shoe-in for any program. And so, with that said, the buckets exist because you got to kind of frame it up in your mind. I also don't believe you should ever apply to an MBA program that you wouldn't be super excited to attend, right? Business school, applying is a lot of work. Attending is a lot of money, a lot of time, risk in your career, right? There's so many factors there. So definitely do not apply to a school just so that you can have an acceptance under your belt, but you wouldn't actually plan to attend. But that said, in terms of what that sort of distribution looks like, it does really come back to the where or the when. If you're targeting, like, I want to go to business school next year and I want to maximize my chances of getting into an MBA program next year, then, you're probably going to apply to a few more programs and you're going to have a wider range of programs that will help maximize that chance of success. And also, if you're considering chances of getting scholarships, that will also help improve those odds. But, for the applicant that has a very distinct focus and maybe doesn't necessarily feel like they need an MBA in order to take their next step, but they want it because it will be incremental, it'll be additive, it might accelerate something they're trying to do, or maybe minimize risk in something they're trying to do next. They might say, for me, it's only Harvard, Stanford, or Wharton, or I'm not going to go to business school. In which case, they're not going to have a safety, right? They're probably not even going to have a target necessarily. But that's still the right approach for them because that is sort of their criteria, and that's their line in the sand.
If somebody who thinks that maybe their application might not be the strongest and they are already aware that they definitely get into a T30 school, but then that's where they at least try to aim high and go for the dream schools. In that situation, what would you recommend them?
In terms of the number of schools?
Yeah, number of schools, and then should they actually aim for dream, target, and safety?
Got it. Yeah. Okay. So, going back to my recommendation that I really don't recommend applying to more than 6 schools.
Correct.
I would apply to either 2 or 3, like reach, if you will, right? 2 or 3 target, and then 1 or 2, call it highest likelihood. I'll feel comfortable with that name. Highest likelihood programs. And that will really help you maximize your chance of success. And also, in an ideal world, you have multiple acceptances in those different buckets, and they come with also different scholarship offers. And then you can kind of weigh the pros and cons and potentially even try to negotiate with some of the programs that would be a higher priority for you.
Understood. Another question I had was, what is the single biggest trap that you think applicants fall into that makes them apply to completely wrong schools?
I think, a big trap is often like what other people think.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Whether, and not that those people are necessarily wrong, but whether it's, what a coworker said to you, or a parent, or a mentor, or your friends, or what you're going to feel good like bragging about right at the bar, whatever that is, I think letting external factors drive your decision as opposed to starting with you. And you'll notice in all of my answers that we've been talking about in the conversation so far, it really does come back to the applicant and what they want. What are their goals? What are their objectives? Why are they going to business school? Because that is really the most important thing. That's what the AdCom is trying to understand through the application process, right? That's why there's essay questions and an interview and things like that, right? They really want to understand why are you doing this? What do you want to get out of it? What is your vision for the future? How can we help? And so starting with yourself is so important, but sometimes that means bucking the trend, right? I'll share a little bit of a personal story.
I wanted to ask you that.
About this. So I personally, I applied to 3 business schools. By the way, I was only going to apply to 1 business school, but my consultant talked me into applying to 3. He's like, it's too risky to only apply to 1. Like, please apply to 3. I said, okay, fine. I will do it for you. So my top choice, my dream school was Columbia Business School. I wanted nothing more than to live in New York, and I wanted to do a complete career pivot 180 into retail, fashion, brand management, marketing. That was my focus. And for me, like, New York City was the place where you had to be.
Yeah.
And I only wanted to go to Columbia. At the time, they had an early decision application pathway. I was just going to do that. My consultant talked me into also applying to Wharton and Booth. So as I started sharing more about my application process with other people, everyone tried to talk me out of wanting to go to Columbia. Like, no, you should go to Wharton. Wharton's a better school. No, you should go to Booth, or you should apply to Kellogg. Kellogg is the marketing school, right? So many people tried to talk me into applying to other programs. But I knew that Columbia was going to give me the best pathway into the companies and the industry I wanted to target. I just knew it. I knew it in my heart. And so it didn't matter to me necessarily that those were technically other programs that might be better in the rankings.
Correct.
I just wanted that program. And so ultimately, I got accepted to Columbia, early decision. So I got my decision early. And then at the time, I had already received my Wharton and my Booth interview invites, but I hadn't actually gone on the interview yet. And so a mentor of mine said, like, you have to go on those interviews. Like, I don't care that Columbia is binding. Go on those interviews because you're going to change your mind. You're going to want to go to Wharton, or you want to go to Booth if you get in. And I said no. I said, I know what I want. I have the answer that I want. And so I was literally 2 days away from hopping on an airplane to fly to Chicago, and I slightly declined the interviews to both programs. Have zero regrets. But I could see how easy it would have been for me to listen, and because the voices were loud. And I certainly, I make it in retrospect, yes, like, I know I made the right decision, but in the moment I was conflicted. I was like, oh my God, what if they're right? What if I'm missing something? What if I have blinders on and I'm making a mistake? And that's real, right? The noise, I would say, back then there wasn't really like Reddit and social media the way there is now. So yeah. And so like now the voices and the noise is like amplified times a million.
Oh, wow. So then at that time, at least you didn't listen and you just went with your gut feeling. And
I did.
Thankfully, like Columbia did accept you. So,
Yeah.
you didn't have to wait and find out the answer later on.
That's right.
That's awesome. Did you see any client or applicant apply to all the right schools on paper, but still get things completely wrong at the end?
I don't think I've seen that necessarily. I think I have a pretty, and my team has a pretty rigorous process around really making sure that, school selection is something that our applicants are doing thoughtfully and not just superficially or, based on reasons that are external, like we talked about. What I will say I've had happen is applicants who would actually discounted or not included a program on their list for external or I would say reputational reasons, who then ultimately ended up applying to those programs and in several cases attending those programs because they were able to kind of look past the bias. I'll give you one example. So this was several years ago now. One of my clients, she was working at Google in FP&A, so in like a financial planning and analysis role, and really wanted to pivot into retail and e-commerce. That was her story. And so she, of course, she was applying to Harvard, she was applying to Stanford, she applied or wanted to apply to Kellogg as well, and also Columbia. I was really encouraging her, like, listen, you should consider Wharton. They have a really strong retail club. They have very strong recruiting relationships, like due to their proximity to New York, to the broader like e-commerce CPG ecosystem. You should consider Wharton. I think you would really like it. And she wanted an urban environment. But she didn't want to apply to Wharton. She's like, I think it's all like, PE and finance people, and it's like really aggressive. I don't want to go there. I know someone who went there and he was an a-hole. I'm like, okay. Well, why don't you visit? And so I convinced her to visit. She said, okay, fine. I'll be in New York. I can take the train down to Philadelphia. She visited and ended up completely changing her mind about applying to Wharton. She said, I was wrong. I really enjoyed my campus visit. I enjoyed the students that I met. It's much more diverse than I thought it was. And so she ended up applying to Wharton and ultimately ended up choosing Wharton as her program.
Oh, wow. Oh, well, there you go. At least she got to change her mind by it.
Exactly.
Oh, that's awesome. Another question I had was, how much do you think applicants let ego drive their school list? I know you mentioned it once. I can hear that buzz sound. Oh, okay. Now it's gone.
Sorry about that. I'm going to take this off my lap so that I don't touch it.
How much do you think applicants let ego drive their school list, and how do you talk someone out of an unrealistic list?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think we all do it. It's human.
Yeah.
I don't fault you for that. No judgment. You're spending a lot of money. And so do you want to be able to have those bragging rights and feel good about yourself that you got into a program with a 7% acceptance rate? Like, who wouldn't want that, right? Like, yes, that just feels good. But I think there's more to it than that, right? Like, yes, there's just that like achievement, right, mentality. But I think also, for folks in some industries, particularly, I'll say in like private equity and VC, those industries are highly biased towards a very small subset of MBA programs. And it's a self-fulfilling cycle, right? Like, I see applicants, they look around, they're like, all of my bosses, all of the principals at my company or the companies that I want to work for, they all went to like Harvard or Stanford or Wharton. And so I'm going to assume that those are the only programs that matter in this industry. So yes, maybe that's also ego, but I think that's also like, I'm looking around, and if this is what I want to do, I'm not going to feel confident that I'm going to be an attractive hire for them when I don't see anyone else in this area with an MBA from those other programs. Now, can you be the exception to the rule? Of course, anybody can be. But when you're looking to just maximize your chances, right, and kind of play the game of risk mitigation, it's natural to filter down towards those few subsets of programs. So is it part ego, but also part like the reality of what you see in the industry that you're surrounded by or that you want to ultimately break into? I think that's part of it also. I think, in terms of your second question of like, how do you get past ego? I think really leaning into research and understanding student life and understanding how the programs are different from each other really does make a big difference, right? Like, I can't just tell you to like discount Harvard. I mean, Harvard is Harvard. I'm never going to be able to win that battle, and I'm not going to try. Yeah. But what I can say is like, okay, visit Harvard, but also visit Sloan when you're in Boston. Maybe, stop by New Haven and check out Yale when you're going down the East Coast, right? And just understand how these programs are different from each other and see kind of through your own eyes, the campus life, student experience, sit on a class if you can, and understand how they're different from each other. And my experience has been that once you see it for yourself and start to understand more of the nuances and differences between the programs, you start to emphasize less, right? Those like more superficial reasons, and start to better understand, okay, what is this going to mean for me on a day-to-day basis? And can this other program also enable me to achieve my goals? And maybe there'll be some other things that it brings to the table that another higher ranked program might not. So it is individual, but I think research and knowledge is really the antidote.
Makes sense. Now, this is something I've noticed a lot with students, especially when they're not really sure 100% what they're going to be doing after their MBA is over. So how much should the post-MBA goals drive school selection, in your opinion?
Oh, well, you got to figure that out. Yeah. That is a lot of what we focus on as admissions consultants. What we focus on with our clients is, yes, not everyone knows exactly when they're starting out this process, and that's okay. I didn't. But you have to do that work up front as part of the application process, because otherwise, and I'm not saying you might not be considering, path A or path B or maybe path C, right? But you still need to have very clear reasons for why those are your options. How are they getting you closer to your long-term goal? And also, like, how are you going to be competitive to pursue those paths, right? That's the other side of it. And so you really do need to figure that out. And if you don't know yet, maybe you should wait a year to apply, right? Maybe you should wait and do a little bit more research and soul searching and really understand yourself better to know what you want and what you don't want, right? Because what you don't want is equally as important. But my strong recommendation is you're going to be more successful as an applicant anyways if you know what you want. But B, maybe you should think about not trying to go to business school until you know what you want, because once you get there, you're going to be running at 1,000,000 miles an hour. You're going to have to constantly prioritize your time and make decisions between multiple ways you could be spending that next hour. And so if you don't know what you're aiming towards, you're just going to get lost, and you're going to end up feeling like you wasted your time or you have regrets because you should have done X when you did Y.
Of course. Now, if someone who's watching this right now has 10 schools on their list, what do you think is the one question they should ask themselves about each school to decide if it stays or goes?
Ooh, the one question. I think I would probably, again, go back to professional goals. Is this school, do its resources, its network, right, academic focus areas, geography, everything, will it maximize my chances of successfully achieving my post-MBA goals?
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
At the end of the day, that's like the one thing.
Of course. And I mean, hey, if anyone was watching this, if you're still shortlisting your business schools, feel free to just comment down below, like some of the options that you're like still unsure of, and Melody, or if she's gonna look at the comments through later, we can answer them one by one. But I have a few more questions. Like, one is, what do you think is the most underrated school you think that applicants constantly overlook, but that they should definitely keep in their radar this year?
Ooh, the most underrated school. You know what I'll say is, and I hope this doesn't offend anyone, but I would say Haas.
Oh, okay.
Haas.
Why would it offend you?
Because I don't want to imply that it's, not a great program, or that it's, being discounted by applicants whatsoever. But I think that Haas is an excellent MBA program that I think gets overshadowed by Stanford, honestly. But in terms of its, geographic advantage, right, very much comparable to Stanford. A tremendous amount of investment and focus has been placed on the entrepreneurship ecosystem, not just at Haas, but within Berkeley more broadly. So once again, right, going head to head with what Stanford does best. Tremendous recruiting horsepower in kind of the biotech and health tech sector as well. So again, that's also a byproduct of the geographic location, but very much a program that I don't see on my clients' lists as much. But I always bring it up if they're applying to Stanford. I'm like, okay, but what about Haas? Also, for that exact reason. And also similarly small program, right? Similar to Stanford, you're going to get that more intimate community.
That's true. I think I covered most of the questions today. But again, guys, if you're watching this, please feel free to add, your questions in the comment section down below. We always love reading them, after the live session ends. But Melody, last but not least, if anybody wants to reach out to you, where can people find you and work with Vantage Point MBA?
Yeah, absolutely. I always love it when people connect with me on LinkedIn. So Melody Jones, you can find me. There are many of us, but I'm the founder of Vantage Point MBA Admissions Consulting. And then, of course, if you want to check out our website, we do offer a free 30-minute consultation to anyone who's considering working with a consultant who just has questions about the application process more broadly or wants feedback on their profile. Our website is vantagepointmba.com, and you can fill out our request form, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Melody. This was awesome. And it was lovely speaking with you again.
You too.
And once again, guys, please add your questions in the comments down below after this ends, and we'd love to have a look. Alrighty. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.